Are you ready?
Hey everybody, Irashaimase. We're here at the channel talking to you about another one of these really cool episodes on a year of comic book history and things like that. We're doing the 80s. We're episode 3, which is 1982. And last episode we did 1981. Let's go to 82 and let's have a little chit chat about what's going on with the 80s. I love the 80s, as you guys. By the way, subscribe to the channel, like the video. If you want to see the other videos I have of this series, check those out. As you know, I've been doing some painting, so doing a lot of painting videos, things like that. What else has we got? Check out my website. So we're doing a little commercial here. AndresSalazarArt.com. You can see the comic book work, the zine stuff I've done, illustration, and some fine art. Yeah, dude, we're doing fine art. What's fine art? What's illustration? Depends on who's buying it. Okay, here we go. So we are doing this. Should I change the light? Give me one sec. Should we bump the light up a bit? Let's see what happens. Is that too bright? It might be too bright. We'll do that. Okay, let's see if that. I don't know, this glossy paper sometimes makes it funky. New publishers, new formats, new talent, and new mutants. This is interesting because basically they're really pushing the idea that now that we have the direct market in place, things are moving well. And DC's coming back. DC now, Marv Wolfman's kind of spearheading a lot of this changes because of, the success he's doing with Teen Titans. And they're just pushing the positivity of the market. And so maybe I'll just read this a little bit here. And by the way, this is a little bit of like a satire but I'll just read this. I'm so excited. I just don't know where to begin. It's no secret that these are thrilling times for comic book fans. The fan market has grown so large that it's now able to make financially sustained individual titles and specialty magazines. Pacific Comics is now publishing comics that are every bit as good as Marvel or DC's. And Marvel and DC are rising to the challenge of the alternative press that are calculated to appeal directly to the market. What could be better than that? Alternative publishing efforts like Eclipse, Justice Machine, Nexus, Galaxa are providing true alternatives and giving the fans just what they want. Despite the whining of a few grumpy critics, we are, without a doubt, dare I say it, entering in a renaissance of comics art. Now, the spin is that now that we have the direct market, you can have these indie publishers go to them directly and start being competitive with Spider-Man and Batman, right? That's the gimmick. And so it is a cool time. This is cool where you have things like Nexus and stuff like that really made a difference. That it doesn't have to be superheroes. It used to be Westerns and romance. Now it's superheroes, but now you can even have other alternatives in genre and types of work. So it's cool. It's a cool time. Talk a little bit about Captain Carrot and Amazing Zoo Crew. This is Roy Thomas and my buddy Scott Shaw, who we interviewed on the channel. He comes from Hanna-Barbera. He does a bunch of the work there in those first issues. So if you want to watch that video, check that out. Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, wonderful artist. He's one of the best. What can you say more about Wonder Woman? They changed the uniform. They put the W logo on the chest, and I think that was a positive effect. I love this timeline. Let's look at real quick what's going on with the timeline here. What do we've got? Oh, heavy metal. Yeah, Ozzy Osbourne bites the bat of the head. I thought that was not really a thing. I thought that was just a wives' tale, like a folklore that he bit the head of a bat during a performance. I think it was fake, but I don't know. I did not know Wes Craven directed and wrote Swamp Thing. I've seen Swamp Thing many times. I remember when it came out, seeing it because we had HBO, and that's where you would see things like that. But I didn't know Wes Craven did it, so that's kind of neat. John Belushi died. That was sad. Freaking overdose. Falklands War. G.I. Joe was like massive, and I was a huge G.I. Joe nerd. This was a great book. I remember when this came out too. Wolverine. This was Frank Miller and Chris Claremont. I think this is the only collaboration they ever did together. But if you've not read this, it's very good. Wolverine goes to Japan. It's a great story. It's kind of a love story. It's very good. What else is going on? New Mutants. We're going to talk more about that, of course. That's a big deal. I've not seen this, the X-Men Teen Titans crossover. So I actually want to get a hold of this. Hal Foster dies. We've had some episodes of Prince Valiant, so those were good episodes. Henry Fonda dies. Freaking Thriller. I cannot tell you how much Thriller took over the world. But this album, when Thriller came out, I could do a whole channel just on Thriller. It is just amazing. It's just like I can't even talk about how that became everything. This was before social media. This was before computers. But whenever you saw a TV on or anything, it was all about Thriller. And MTV was out by now. And so you saw the videos. Beat It, Billie Jean. The big three were Beat It, Billie Jean, and Thriller, of course. But those three videos were everywhere. It was so good. Okay, Gene Colan. He did some Wonder Woman. I did not know that. I love Gene Colan, so I actually kind of want to look up his work. Once Roy Thomas left, Gene Colan came to do it, and I'm a huge fan of Gene Colan's work, so I would like to look at that. You know, him and Marv Wolfman, of course, worked on Dracula for a long time for Marvel. Okay. A couple other things we talk about is Firestorm. This was very kind of different, where you had this, nuclear reactor disaster with, you have a high school student, Ronnie, and a physicist, Martin, and they fused together to create this one superhero. That was very kind of cool. It was Jerry Conway and artist Al Milgrom were the ones who kind of created that. Continuing with Jerry Conway, we talk a little bit about Micronauts. And if you guys don't know Micronauts were really just a really cool, epic idea. I remember one of my best friends loved the Micronauts. There was just these really cool, different ideas that I felt people were experimenting with. So we had Firestorm, Micronauts, these different kind of ideas. And then another thing was this Blackhawks. So the Blackhawk, I guess it was optioned to be a movie by Spielberg. And the Blackhawks were basically this team of fighter pilots from World War II. And they kind of revamped that comic. And who was writing it? Written by Mark Evanier and drawn by Dan Spiegel. Covers by Dave Cockrum. Of course, later on, I think Chaykin gets his hands on it. He does a small mini-series or something like that with the Blackhawks. Orion. I never read Orion, Lord of Atlantis. They talk about Atari Force. So this was interesting. I didn't know about this. One of DC's 1982 publications couldn't be bought at either the newsstand or the direct market. Instead, Atari Force, created and written by Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway, and drawn by Russ Andrew and Gil Kane, we know him, was published as a serialized insert in 5 Atari 2600 video games: Defender, Berserk, Star Raiders, Phoenix, and Galaxian. So that's kind of cool. So they made these like kind of promotional comics that went inside, went when you bought the cartridge to these games. That's kind of a cool idea. Never read Atari Force. Didn't even know how it was connected. But that's kind of fascinating. Then we're going to talk about Levitz. Paul Levitz, of course, Keith Giffen, R.I.P., rest in peace, love him. And the Legion of Superheroes. This was, the thing about Legion of Superheroes is the fans are like massive fans. They're like hardcore Legion. I know a guy who is a Legion fan, and it's no joke. They're like serious. They were kind of like, they weren't the Teen Titans. They weren't the X-Men, but they were this big group, right? They're all kind of young adults. They all have different powers. Some of them are silly and what have you. But Keith Giffen did the art here, which kind of starts out, I think his work kind of starts out kind of John Byrne, Neil Adams, and then it moves on to other very different ideas like Jose Munoz and some European guys. More kind of abstract work. Almost like a Picasso in a way, kind of cubist. But this was super, super great. The Teens of Tomorrow, just wonderful stuff. And of course, when you talk about that, and you talk about Keith Giffen and what he's done, you have to talk about the Great the Great Darkness Saga, which actually had these issues. Maybe we should do that. Do you guys want me to? I can find these issues. They're in my long boxes. I can find these issues and we can go through these. That would be freaking fun. I bought these for $0.25. They were just in a long box and I picked them up. And yeah, I want to get them now. This was a fun story arc. It really put them on the map, and that whole Levitz Giffen team was just like, everyone was talking about it. That was the jam. And so yeah, that was really cool. Maybe we'll do that episode. Now I'm kind of thinking about that a little bit. Yeah. One of the things Giffen really was trying to do was knock Teen Titans off the number one. So he even says, I wanted to knock the number one Teen Titans off so bad. We were always chasing them, and I wanted just to get 1 month where we could knock them off the perch. But that just never happened. Teen Titans was so freaking popular. They even did a 4-issue miniseries, Tales of the New Teen Titans. The Wolfman created these relationships with those characters that were so connected and so realistic. And George Perez's work was so good, it just you couldn't beat it. Michael Barr, Brian Boland, King Arthur on Baxter paper. So this is the 12-issue maxi series, Camelot 3000. This was a special thing. This was never done before, and it was a mature story. If you haven't read Camelot 3000, it's very cool. It's kind of like reimagining that story, but kind of this futuristic. It's very interesting. It's a kind of a weird futuristic kind of look to it, but it's got the same characters, Lancelot, Perseus, all that stuff. The Boland artwork is wonderful, especially for the time. Now it might look a little dated, but I think the artwork is great. The coloring is good. The Baxter paper, they used fancy paper. It was a whole production thing where they're really wanting to make more of a mature book. Not mature like Heavy Metal, but just a little bit more like, it dealt with gender things. There was sexual elements to it. It was cool. It was a big project. It was 12 issues. I think it did become late towards the end there. But bringing in these British people, and this is the beginning of like the British invasion, right? Where you have Morrison, Ellis, Ennis, Boland, Moore, all these guys, writers and artists are coming in. Beasley, all these British guys are coming to who had done work with like Warrior and 2000 AD. Those books are now like coming to Americas and showing people what's up. Yeah, so there's that going on. Here we're talking a little bit about Doug Moench and I don't know how you pronounce it. I'm pronouncing it Moench. Jim Shooter and Doug Moench are having some conflict. There was this issue with, I think they were at a bar. There was some conversation about kind of like killing everyone in the Marvel Universe and revamping them, which they've done many times. And so there was some confusion on what books would end, and there was some serious heat about that, and so there's some people left. Listen, I don't know the whole story. No one knows but them. Jim Shooter definitely knows comics, but not everyone's perfect. Let's read a couple little quotes here. As a rhetorical example, I said that there are no sacred cows, meaning that if some writer came to me with a brilliant plan to revamp or make Captain America more exciting, that it would be considered. I chose Captain America particularly because I thought that would be probably the most extreme, unlikely example I could think of, trying to demonstrate to Doug that he shouldn't be fettered. He shouldn't let his mind be shackled by imaginary constraints. So this idea that Jim was giving was, hey, you know what? We can just the page is open to try anything you want, right? But there's conflict there. There was a little misunderstanding as far as job security and character, autonomy or your ability to be creative versus let's try to make a buck, right? And that's kind of like the conflict. Oh, here we go. Here's talking about the drinks. Here we go. Jim Shooter, myself, Tom DeFalco, Mark Grinwald. Here we go. This is with Jim Starlin. We went out for a drink after work, as comic writers and artists tend to do. After we had a few drinks in us, we began speculating on what could be done with what. There was talk of Captain America being replaced in Tony Stark and Iron Man. It all was just speculation. There was no fact to it. At one point, it was suggested that the entire Marvel Universe be destroyed, and the next month, all the books would start over again with new origins at issue number 1. It was all just talk. I don't know who got the story to who, but nothing was ever going to be done with it, but it was reported as a fact. So that's the thing. People are just talking, they're brainstorming, but people get bent out of shape, dude, when you mess with their career or their book, things like that. Daredevil, Miller now is going to leave Daredevil soon, but he's just doing stuff that's never been done before, and it's pretty amazing. Marvel Fanfare. This was a direct market book, I believe. Never read this, but the idea was to really start using the direct market as well as newsstands to kind of try new things, try graphic novels, things like that. And this is actually when they start also doing the Epic imprint. So Epic Comics were definitely the more mature stuff, like Heavy Metal, basically, competing with that magazine format, which would allow creators to retain the copyright of their work, like Sergio Aragonés, Frank Miller, Walt Simonson, Jim Starlin, so they could keep your copyright as well as you don't have the code because it's not a comic, it's a magazine. So, and they used editor Archie Goodwin to kind of go through that that thing. And Archie Goodwin worked well with Jim Shooter. They seem to be work well together. Okay. Contest of Champions, I'm not too familiar with, but basically this was it almost feels like something they were doing prior to Secret Wars, as far as having this book where you can it's a limited series, and you have all these different heroes kind of fighting together to see who's like the champion. There's like a galactic story of it, and there was a follow up later called back in '87 though, so many years, 5 years later. But it didn't seem like it was much of a deal. We mentioned earlier in the timeline about the X-Men Teen Titans crossover, and this was going to be actually a Legion of Superheroes and X-Men, but because Titans was the top book, they wanted to use those characters, and it was going to be Dark Phoenix and Darkseid working together. And Walt Simonson was going to do the art because Dave Cockrum was too busy with X-Men. And I guess they changed it. Wolfman changed it to be Deathstroke the Terminator. So Deathstroke was going to be the agent of Darkseid to kind of like do this. And it's called Apocalypse Now. I need to read this, so I'm going to have to find this book. If you guys have read it, let me know what you think of it. Probably could find it on eBay for a decent amount. New Mutants. This was big. You know, X-Men was the best-selling book, like, of any book. And they wanted to, like, double down on this. So Claremont came out with this new book. And I have the first 32 or so book issues. And, you know, when Sienkiewicz comes in like the mid-teens, I think, that's when to me it just like really ramps up. But I have the first issues. I don't know where I got them. I think someone gave them to me, but it's good. It's basically Claremont just like doing more mutant stuff, right? And he's really focusing, just like Wolfman was doing, I was saying earlier, on these relationships, these teens, you know, figuring themselves out, all that kind of stuff. So that was going on. And then at the same time, we had the Wolverine thing, where basically now you have Wolverine, which is just like a Ronin type character or a failed samurai, right? Who goes back to Japan, and his bride to be, what was her name? Kiko? No, not Kiko. I can't remember. But there's a whole like thing there. I won't go into it, but you need to. I don't want to spoil it, but that is a great book. So highly recommend the Wolverine. Yep, that's the issue, and that one's pretty expensive, if I can recall. At least it was back in the day. One of the things it mentions about Marvel management really wanted to continue doing these like movie adaptions, like Annie, Blade Runner, Time Bandits, Conan the Barbarian, Rocky. I didn't know they were going to do Rocky. But, you know, they had to make all these agreements with toy companies, G.I. Joe, Hasbro, Transformers, all these things. So there was a lot of, like, this merchandise type of collaborative things and movie tie-ins. But out of all those, G.I. Joe was the one that really became something special. And a lot of that is because of the creatives who were working on it. Larry Hama, if I recall, what's his name? He did Doc Strange. The name escapes me, but he worked on it as well. I'll think of it in like 5 minutes. If you haven't read G.I. Joe, highly recommend it. Just amazing stuff. Again, this year we're having all these new comics. Eclipse is out, Pacific Comics is out, and they're putting out a lot of things which are different, you know. And I guess there was some legal issues with Howard the Duck. I guess it was at one point. It was a in a Man-Thing issue. Howard the Duck, the writer Steve Gerber, and there were some issues legally with getting back the rights or something with Marvel. Saber. I never read Saber. It's another Eclipse book. I want to get all these Eclipse books. They're hard to find because they had low print runs, But I want to read Nexus, Saber. I'll even read freaking Destroyer Dog. I want to try some of these things and really kind of get a sense of what was happening in that world. Gru, of course. Sergio. There's Pacific Comics right there. Yeah, check it out. Look at that. This is San Diego Comic-Con. Wow, how it's changed, and yet at the same time, it's the same stuff, right? Selling books. I've seen this book. I've never read it. Gru is great. His just line work is so freaking good. He's one of the best. I would love to meet Sergio. He lives down the road, and I've attempted to like get there, but it's he doesn't know me. I don't know him. I mean, it's hard to just get into it. Okay, before we end this because I think it's the last page, right? Yeah, we're gonna go. What does 83 go into? Oh, we have a shaken head. Oh, we're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into American. Yeah, we'll get into this stuff. Okay, this will be fun. 2003 will be fun, or 83. But let's talk Love and Rockets. So, Love and Rockets, Fantagraphics, Gary Groth. Gary Groth was he was, the executive director of Comics Journal. He was publishing this Fantagraphics line, right? I would say, and this is just me talking out of my ass, that Love and Rockets has brought more people to Fantagraphics and has supplied Fantagraphics with a steadier income than any other book. I think that's actually not disputable. Name another Fantagraphic books that has been going on as long or has sold as much. Okay, they got some big hits, they got some things, even some things over the last 10 years or 5 years that have been really popular. We won't even go into them, but they have YouTube channels too. But nothing like Love and Rockets, man. Love and Rockets was a whole nother freaking ballgame with what they were doing as far as bringing in a new type of writing, a new type of art, the black and white, the old school, loving superheroes, but bringing in that kind of Zap energy, that indie underground stuff. And the Hernandez brothers, deserve to be in the conversation as far as like bringing it. And look at this. Is this Michael Boland? I mean, is this Jamie drawing this? Because this looks like Brian Boland. It really, really does. In fact, it's got to be Brian Boland. I mean, look at the way the lines are done. But maybe it's Jamie. It's really good. Anyway, I can't talk enough about it. I have many episodes on this channel about Love and Rockets. I will continue to talk about them because, it's the real freaking deal. They're the real McCoy. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you for watching. We'll have more, and we'll talk about 83. And I love these things. And I apologize I didn't go into every detail. We didn't talk about some of this stuff here, but I don't want to overwhelm you. But maybe for 83, I'll really hit it hard on that. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Bye.